welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. This is episode 40. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Andrea. Today we interview Elizabeth Johnston, Shetland's expert spinner, lace knitter and weaver. And in the interview you're going to see Elizabeth spin and it'll take your breath away how fine she goes. Elizabeth also talks about Shetland lace knitting and weaving on the warp-weighted loom, which is an ancient loom dating back to the Stone Age. Donna Smith is also going to show you her new yarn, Langsoond, which comes from her very own flock of Shetland sheep.
Yep, Donna is also going to give me a short lesson on wool sorting, which is a lot of fun. We're going to show you around the Jamieson and Smith's store, and we're also going to let you see a little bit of the wool sorting demonstration by Oliver Henry. Andrea has prepared a tutorial on inserting armhole steeks.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the fruity steeked cowl, which is underway. But right now we're going to start with under construction. This is the start of Paris's Scarf by Nancy Marchant. It's a brioche pattern essentially. It's got brioche knit, brioche purl, and also some double knitting sections in it. You can see the double knitting here. This was meant to be my current project, but this has actually been done so far by Andrea, because neither of us knew how to do double knitting, and so Andrea had to learn how to do that and then teach me, and then be able to correct any mistakes that I might make. That kind of suggests that I might make mistakes, dolls.
Well, you usually do.
Sometimes, yeah, it's true. I normally knit late at night when we're watching telly and the concentration maybe isn't quite there.
Yeah.
But I'm really keen to get onto it. I am patron of the Fruity brioche cowl, which is underway. It's finishing end of November.
You're the leader of it.
I'm the leader.
Yeah, so you better
I need to get
a crack on.
Need to get some brioche happening. But there it is. It's a beautiful pattern. Yeah. I'm looking forward to doing it. I am aiming to be working on that by next episode.
Yes.
But for now, what I am working on is this sock. Well, this sock is completed. And Andrea, isn't it a beautiful sock?
It's a beautiful sock.
This sock is, of course, for Andrea. You can see, well, the yarn is the Blacker Yarns Mohair blend, right? 50-50 mohair and in this case Manx. It's a beautiful yarn. I think it's really nice to work with. No nylon, which I love. 2x2 rib in the cuff and right down the leg, and also at the top of the foot, and a, what do you call it? Heel flap and gusset.
Yeah.
So it's all just as you want it, and it's a shade of green.
Yes.
So
another shade of green for me.
So that's the first one, and this is where I'm up to on the second one. You were talking about fine yarn styles. The rate this is going, I find this quite a fine yarn.
It is a fine yarn, Dars.
It's a 4-ply.
It's not as fine as what you're going to see Elizabeth do, of course.
No, but it does take me quite a long time.
It does. Yep. But you're doing well. But you have to get a crack on.
Yeah.
Because you've got to do some work on this.
Yep. Next episode, onto the scarf.
Yes. Continuing on in under construction, I'm going to show you my Osmors Kofte by Sissel Hurjevik. I'll be saying that wrong, but I have to announce the name somehow. And I'm not doing as much knitting as I have in the past. I'm back to knitting, but I am still taking it slowly. But I have done some progress on this. Last episode, I spoke in a lot of detail about this design because Sissel does incorporate some really interesting design elements into it. So here's a picture of the original design, and I'm going to be changing mine slightly. I'll be changing it slightly primarily because I want to do a tighter fabric, or use a tighter gauge than what Sissel recommends. So she recommends 24 stitches in 32 rows to 10 centimetres or 4 inches squared. And when I do an all-over ferrule design in a fingering weight, I like it to be closer to 28 stitches, 32 rows. So that's what I'm going to do, but if I was to take her size and knit it in my gauge, it would end up at least 10 to 12 centimetres too narrow. So it literally means I have to rewrite all of the measurements. So what I did is to take a larger size, which would normally be way too big for me, and I used that as a starting point for the stitch count, and I am going to make mine a cropped jacket that will sit in my waist, or actually about 3 centimetres lower than my waist. And if you're looking for your waist, it's your belly button. So
you're tempting me to look for your waist, dolls.
So mine is going to sit in my waist like this, and so that's where I started with the stitch count of a larger size, and then I need you to hold this for me.
Yep.
And then I very slightly increased in a slight V shape on both sides up to the bust line. So it's slightly wider here at the bust than it is down here. And it's very easy to do that because on the sides where you would normally have side seams, and this is not seamed, it's knitted in the round, but Sissel uses a purl column here, 1 stitch purl column. And then it's easy to put your increases or decreases on either side of that. And if you're wondering what this rolly piece of stocking stitch down the bottom is, that's going to be the lining. So when you start this, you start knitting back and forward in stocking stitch like this, and then you join it in the round with your steek stitches running up the centre, and you start your patterning. And then later when you're finished, you're going to turn that up and sew it. And I've pinned it at the back to show you, like that. And that gives it a really lovely finish with an extra colour down below, and particularly on a jacket, because then if it swings open, you see down here a really nice finish of another colour. So I think that's a really good design element. So changing the pattern to fit me in the lower body half was relatively easy. The hard part is to rewrite the shaping of the armhole on a set-in sleeve on the body and the corresponding cap shaping on the sleeve for a set-in sleeve. So if you are going to change a pattern like this, a really good place to start, if you can, is to get another jumper that you've knitted that might be in the same gauge or similar gauge, similar weight yarn and similar technique. So in my case, an all-over ferrule or stranded pattern. So I took a couple of garments that I've knitted in the past, and this is in a fingering weight, and it's all over ferrule pattern, and it's by Alice Darmore, and this is the Meadow Sweet cardigan. And I had a look at the sleeve cap. Now this design is at a slightly, or it's a smaller stitch count because it's a tighter fitting garment, but the way she's done this sleeve cap, you can notice that it's quite long and narrow, and you can do long and narrow on a tight-fitting garment. It fits me. It's not my favourite because sometimes it can end up being a little bit peaky on the cap for me. So I had another look at another garment. This is also an Alice Darmore garment, and this is the Mary Tudor. And it is a slightly looser gauge, and it's a wider fit, a looser fit because it's more jacket-like. And if I have a look at this sleeve cap, it's broader. So it's broader at the top, and that fits my arm and my shoulder better. So I'm going to use this one as a guide. But it really is only a guide because the stitch count for this pattern and the stitch count for mine here is different. But it does give me a good indication of where to start. So how many stitches, or roughly how many stitches, should I immediately cast off with? And then at what ratio should I shape this curving here? Because I've got a little diagram to show any newbies. What's really important is on your body, when you've got a set-in sleeve, the curve that you do here has to mirror exactly the curve that you do on your cap. This is the sleeve and this is the sleeve cap. So the first curve on the cap of your sleeve. So for example, I cast off 5 stitches immediately, and then on the next 2 rows I cast off 2 stitches, and then maybe on every alternate row 4 times I decrease 1 stitch. I have to do exactly the same pattern down here. So that has to match perfectly with this bit. How you shape your decreases or how wide or long this is at the top, you've got fudge room, but it does have to correspond with the length you've got up here. But this section here has to mirror exactly. So I have started that. I've inserted my steeks, as you can see here, in the armhole. And another thing, when you're changing a pattern, I constantly remeasure all the time to check that my calculations that I've done actually match my actual knitting. So I always have a calculator and a tape measure in my notions bag.
That's the calculator you had at school, Dolls.
It is. This is my trusty school.
It's a lifelong calculator, and that's the tape measure that you got for your birthday.
It is.
Yeah.
Because the other one was worn out completely and couldn't read it.
Yep.
So coming up now is a short tutorial, it's only 4 minutes long, where I show you how I insert my steeks for the armholes. And then straight after that, Donna's going to talk to you about her new yarn, Langsoond. I've knitted my cardigan up to the length where I need to start the armhole shaping, and I now need to place my steek stitches at the sides of my cardigan where the armholes will be. So one definition of the word steek is to close or to shut, and another definition is to bridge. So first I will cast off 11 stitches under each arm, which will mean that I'll have a gap in this tubular fabric. So putting in the steek stitches over the top of the cast off edge will close up the gap, and I'll be able to continue knitting in the round. You can see my steek stitches down the front of the cardigan, and I use 10 steek stitches. The 2 outer edge stitches are where you can later pick up stitches to knit the button bands, and I keep them in one single colour. And the middle 8 stitches, I alternate the colours so it has a checkerboard effect. I learned this from Alice Starmore's patterns. But you can also use less stitches in the steeking column, and you can knit them in stripes if you prefer. I've already knit across my right front, and this purl stitch here, this purl stitch column, marks my side seam. And I'll cast off 5 stitches on either side of that side seam column. So together with that purl stitch, that means I'm casting off 11 stitches. I'm going to cast off with the green, my background colour, in the right hand so that the cast off edge will be green. And I'm just going to weave the other colour in and out so that it's also on the other side when I need it. So you can see every second stitch I'm putting the tip of my right hand needle underneath the left hand yarn, and that's just weaving it in. After casting off my 11 stitches, I have both strands still on the needle, and they're ready to continue along the back. So I cast off with the green, and I wove the light blue behind. So they're both here ready. I continue in pattern to the other side of the armhole, and then I do the same thing. I'll cast off 11 stitches. I've just completed that round, and in that round I cast off 11 stitches at both armholes, but I haven't put on my sticking stitches yet. So what I have to do now to continue the armhole shaping on each arm is to decrease 1 stitch at each edge of this 11 stitch cast off. So there is my SSK, which is a slip knit through the back loop. That's a 1 stitch decrease. Now I have to cast on 10 steek stitches so I can continue over here. So I just take my 2 yarns, I put the blue one around my thumb, and I just do a long tail cast on. So there's my 10 cast on stitches. They're all green at the moment. On my following round I will make the outside edges the light blue, and I'll start checkerboarding the inside 8 stitches. And I'm ready to continue on in pattern across the back, but I also have to decrease 1 stitch at this edge. So I will do that by knitting 2 together. So you can see that I'm going to be continuing my armhole shaping with decreases on either side of the 10 steek stitches. I've knitted further up the body, and you can see clearer now the curved line of the set-in sleeve with the decreases along this edge. So this is the front, that's the other side, the back, it's got the same curved line, and then in the middle are the 10 steek stitches. So when I'm finished, I'll cut up the middle of the steek, I'll trim it down to 2 stitches width, and then I'll turn it on the inside and sew it down, and it'll look just like a normal set-in sleeve.
Hello, I'm Donna Smith, and I'm here today to tell you about my new yarn range that I've had spun. It's called Langsoond, I live on a croft here in Borough in Shetland. I've been thinking for a while about getting some yarn spun from our own sheep. We've got quite a small flock at the moment, so what I did was I gathered the fleece from our sheep and also the fleece from some of our neighbours, and had it sent it away and got it spun. I've called it Langsoond because that's a strip of water that runs below the bottom of the croft. The croft that I live on runs from the house here right down to the water, and the strip of water that it meets is called Langsoond, but we in Shetland call it Langsoond, so I've gone for the phonetic spelling. And also the neighbour's crofts runs into Langsoond as well, so I thought it was quite an appropriate name. The yarn, this is the yarn here, so it's a double knit weight in 4 natural shades. This shade here, this is the natural white. Shetland sheep, they come in white. Most of them are white, and most of the ones we have are white, but we've got some coloured ones as well. So there's some brown, some grey, some Shetland black, which is a very dark brown. And what I've done is I've blended them together to get a range of shades. So this one here, this is the natural white, and I've called it Kexie. And the Kexie is the Shetland dialect word for a hogweed, which is a plant that you would see growing at the sides of the roads here in Shetland. And the flower it's a creamy white flower, which is quite similar to this shade here. There's 2 shades of grey here. There's a lighter shade and a darker shade. The lighter shade I've called Dala mist, and that's a dialect name for the mist that lies in the valleys in the morning. And the darker grey here is called Hagery, and that's a Shetland dialect word for a grey heron. This one here, it's a browny shade. It's murret, which is a sort of middle brown colour mixed with white, so it's sort of a grey brown. And I've called it Linty, which is the dialect name for a linnet, which is a small, very small bird that you would see around in Shetland. When I was thinking about what shades to have in my range, I set 2 with the carders. I was speaking to the mill. I sent it away to the Natural Fibre Company in Cornwall, and I was speaking to the mill about the different shades. And what we did was I took hand carders and I just played around with blending some of the fleeces. This is some of the natural colours. So we've got natural white here, and I just took little pieces of the coloured and I just played around with the carders for a little while, so just to get the different blends or the different percentages, and then I sent it away to the mill and they sent me different samples back. So we sent back and forth a few different samples before I decided on the shades. And here you can see that we're starting to get a little bit of grey. I took a little bit more time over that just to get the different shades. I sat and blended that together. We had this process, we sent samples like this back and forth before we decided on the actual colours. And also I had to decide on the type of spin, so I chose it to be woolen spun. Shetland fibres are quite short in staple length, so woolen spun suits it far better. And also it's got quite a tight spin on it as well, so that gives it a good stitch definition, and it's also quite bouncy and it's quite durable as well. Okay, so I designed 3 patterns with the Langsoond yarn. The first one is a cowl. I designed it using 1 skein of the yarn, because it's always quite nice to have a pattern that you can make with 1 skein. If you're anything like me, you go to shows and buy 1 skein and then don't know what to do with it. So this is a cowl which is made with the travel and vine pattern, lace pattern. It's knit in the round, so there's limited finishing. I named it Maggie's Cowl. And the reason I named it Maggie's Cowl, I was thinking about places around the croft, and on the croft we've got a stone wall enclosure called Maggie's Crub, and a crub is basically an enclosure, and we usually keep when the sheep have lambs, then we separate the new lambs with their mums at lambing time. So that's Mage's cowl. The hat here, it's a slouchy hat made with two colours. This one is made with the Kexi and the darker grey, the Hagery. It's the same stitch pattern I used on the Goodyear's hat, and it's just a pattern I really like, zigzags and simple straight lines. So I used that pattern. It's got a pom-pom on it, and the crown converges to form a star at the top. And I called it Stramsoond hat. Langsoond, the strip of water which the yarn is named after, runs into another strip of water called Stramsoond. So that's the name of the hat. And lastly, I designed this shawl or wrap, which is called the Miteless wrap. The inspiration for that was mussel farms, which are seen around the Shetland coasts and also in Langsoond. And mussel farms are made up of a series of black barrels or floats on the surface of the water, and below them there's ropes, and then the mussels naturally attach and are grown onto that. So on the top of the water you see like a series of dots, or lines with dots. And I actually thought I would like to do something inspired by that. And I was speaking to my friend one day, and we were actually driving past one, and she said, why not just do a series of holes and garter stitch? So I said, okay. So then I was out driving one day, and the idea for this came into my head, just to use a series of lines, so as the farms would be in the water. So it's knit from, you start at the corner and you increase one side up into the centre, and you do the same on the other side but a mirror image, and then it's grafted at the centre. So that's the Miteless wrap. And the name for that, Miteless, is the genus name for mussels. So that's where the name from that came from. It's been really good to actually use the yarn. I've been planning it for such a while, and I've been thinking about it for such a while, so it's been really good to at last be able to show you some of the pieces that I've designed with it.
We had a lovely afternoon with Donna. Donna lives on the island of Burra in Shetland. She lives at the top of a hill with this stunning view down over the croft, so the farm where they live with their sheep, and then down to this body of water which is called Langsoond. Whilst we were there, she also knocked up a batch of bannocks, which is the savoury scones, which are created in Shetland. It's their version of that. That was lovely. So we had a great chat with her.
We did. We had a great afternoon. So I'm always thinking about what Andrew's next project could be. I have a few lined up for him.
Keep me busy.
And so looking at Donna's yarn, we decided to get some of it so that I could design a simple vest for him. And we chose the colour, which is the grey heron. So the dialect for that, as Donna said, was Hagery.
Hagery, yes. Yeah. Speaking of dialect, we are having withdrawal from Shetland, so we need something to keep us in touch. We've been watching the TV series Shetland, which is really nice. A crime series it is, but it's a good show.
Yeah, and we've been sort of trying to practice our Shetland dialect.
We're trying to get the dialect out.
So I'm going to make a peery pattern.
Yeah.
A peery pattern for Andrew to knit up.
Yeah.
So, and I've just noticed, Dales, that this is going to go gorgeous with your grey shirt.
What a happy coincidence.
Yes, it is a happy coincidence.
Yeah.
So it's a DK weight yarn, and I thought he could very well do with a vest. And at first I thought, oh, it'll be great, I'll design something with cables on it. But then I thought that might be too thick and warm, because if you are wearing a vest over a shirt, it's obviously going to be warm enough that you don't need sleeve coverings. So you don't want the vest to be too thick, heavy and warm.
Yeah.
And I think you're like probably a lot of men, that you will only wear something if it's really comfortable and practical.
Yeah.
So just because it's beautiful, you won't wear it.
Not one to suffer for fashion, mate.
No. So I think, therefore, I'll go for something that's simple. Might even be just stocking stitch fitted vest.
That sounds like a good approach.
Maybe something very mildly decorative.
All right. I'm I'm very pleased about the thought of no sleeves.
Yeah.
Because I know how many stitches are in a sleeve.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
While we were at Donna's, Donna did take me outside and give me a quick lesson on sorting fleece. The fleeces are straight off the sheep. They're fresh off the sheep's back, and they are a little bit dirty. They're also very oily. I was really amazed at the amount of lanolin that's in there. So we what do you do? We we put on boiler suits. So I'm all covered up, and Donna took me through that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We did it outside. That was really for the benefit of our viewers. It's not something that you normally do outside. It was extremely windy. We had rocks holding the fleeces down and the rain was threatening.
Yeah.
But it's worth it to get a look at the view out there.
Yeah, because the view that you see is straight out of Donna's front door. It's
Yeah.
really beautiful.
So enjoy that. Straight after that, we'll be taking you to Jamieson and Smith's wool store, taking you a look around that. And you'll also hear a little bit of Oliver Henry's wool sorting demonstration, which was a really popular event at the Shetland Wool Week.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have to do is we have to look through it and take out things like vegetation. So see, we've got bits of grass here.
Yep.
So we have to pick out anything like that, because otherwise that will just go in the yarn and make it a bit rough.
Yep.
So bits like that. And then we go around the edges as well of the fleece, and you can see that sometimes there's like pieces here at the tail end, pieces like that.
Yep.
And
That's
pieces
gotta
that
come out.
are felted. Yeah, that has to come out, and there's some vegetation and things like that. So we just go all the way around the edge like that, pulling it all off.
Okay. And do you separate the fleece into the different colours?
No, no.
don't?
So what I do is I just keep the coloured fleeces all together, and
Yep.
they get mixed into the blended batches.
Okay.
What I do is I sort out the colours. So all the Shetland black ones will go in a bag, all the Murret ones go in a bag, the mixed ones go in a bag.
Okay. So
So-
there is a mixed one. And what would
Yeah.
this be classified as? This looks like mixed.
This
to
will
me.
be mixed, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because we've got little bits of grey and some brown in it, and
Yep.
some white in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what about the quality, the softness? Is that different in the different parts, or?
Yeah, I mean, some parts of it you can see this part is there's got quite a nice crimp in it.
Yep.
And then around the edges, sort of around the underside, it can be quite hairy. So sometimes if it's too hairy, I would just take that away. But otherwise it just gets mixed in. So bits like that just gets pulled off.
Yep.
And then it's pretty good, I think.
Okay, and then it gets rolled up and
And
sent on.
we roll it up and send it on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And how many fleeces have you actually got, or do you have an idea about that?
At the moment, I think there's about 200 or something
200?
like that. So yeah.
Okay.
Here we are inside Jamieson and Smith's shop. Jamieson and Smith started the Shetland Wool Week back in 2010. It's a snug little shop, and the wooden floors and beams gives it a Scandinavian feel. So they held classes here during the Wool Week. They had Fair Isle with Hazel Tyndall, lace knitting with Elizabeth Johnston, a trunk show for Jen Arnold Culliford's new book, A Year of Techniques, and Felicity Ford's new book, Knit Sonic Stranded Colourwork Playbook. Ella Gordon was last year's patron, and she took us through to the shed where the wool from the farmers comes in and gets sorted and stored. And Oliver Henry also does his sorting and grading demonstration here, which you're going to see shortly. This machine is a wool press. It packs the sorted fleece tightly into bales for storage and transportation. And here are some different shades of Murret fleece. Murret means more red, and this very dark chocolate colour is known as Shetland black. So these fleeces are waiting for Oliver to use in his wool sorting demonstration, which was a really popular event, and here is a little bit of it now.
The popular belief, nobody can prove this, was that the Vikings, when they settled here in the 8th and 9th century, brought with them, once they'd finished attacking everybody, brought with them their sheep. And I like to think that that's the incoming sheep to Shetland in the 8th and 9th century, brought over by our cousins, the Vikings, in Scandinavia, Denmark and Norway. But in his report, he says there is a kindly wool sheep. It is hidden away lest it be stolen by persons unknown. You'll have to testify. That is a superb handle, and that is a super soft Shetland, and that is where top grade, super fine. Up until the early 70s, very little employment in Shetland. The fishing was the main employer, the fish factories. So very little employment. Knitwear was still going good, but this here was the cash crop. What we had was the herring industry going way back centuries. It was where all the buyers would come, was Holland, Hanseatic merchants, Holland and Germany. The Dutch in particular bought a lot of fine lace. So this was what the crofter's wife would knit, and this is what the Shetland woolen industry was founded on, was your fine Shetland. He also, according to some of the old crofters, tried to dehair it. See, that's your guard here, and that's your underwool there. Some people think Shetland sheep had two coats. They have two parts to the coat. The staple has got the guard hair to run the weather off, and the lower part, the underwool, is very, very fine. The old crofters used to tell me on a hard winter, the Shetland sheep would produce less wool, but the underwool would be finer for the warm. That was their take on it.
Here is Felicity Ford. She had a mitts-along class, helping people design their own colourwork fingerless mitts. These are some of her swatches. And Felicity's new book, which is due to come out very soon, uses the Jamieson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight yarn. And Jamieson and Smith released their own new book, which covers the history of their company as well as a collection of hand knitting patterns. Last episode we announced that we're starting a steeked garment caul, and you can include any project that you've started from the 1st of October and the caul will go to the end of January. Well, we're now going to extend it to the end of February, and that's because we want to encourage anybody who's never steeked before to get in and try perhaps on a small project first before doing a garment. So I thought what I'd do now is just give you some suggestions on some small projects that you could try, or some easy first time projects that you could include in the caul. So first up, what I noticed is that Mary Jane Mucklestone has a craftsy class, and it is called the Feral Vest, Stranded and Steeked. And when I last looked, it was discounted 50%, which I think is brilliant and great timing for our caul, particularly for newbie steekers. This class is aimed for first-time steekers, and she shows you, and also first-time feral knitters, so you could be a first in both of those. So she aims to show you everything you need to know to do it successfully. And I've actually heard a couple of people talk about the class with high reviews who are very accomplished knitters, and they did the class, they thought it was brilliant, and they still use the vest pattern that you'll get as part of this class as the template for further vests that they might actually design for themselves. They really like the way Mary Jane has done the shaping and everything. So that's interesting. And for that reason, I'm going to possibly do the class as well, because I've always been wanting to design a vest for Andrew, and I'm interested to see how that is. So check out that class, particularly if you're a newbie, because right now it is 50% discounted, and that's great timing. While we're talking about Mary Jane Mucklestone, I'm really excited because she has offered our patrons a 25% discount on her pattern, Jenny at the Fair. So here's a picture of it. This is a perfect steeked project for our Carl, and Mary Jane actually says it's a good first project for steeking, even though it's a big project. So if you have a look at it, you can see that it's knitted bottom up. You start with the ribbing, which is done back and forth in rows, and then it's joined in the round with a steek going up the front. And the sleeves are knitted from the bottom up to the armholes in the round, and then the sleeves and the body are worked together, so they're joined together in a yoke with a raglan shaped armholes, and it's also got a V-neck. So you won't have any steeks in the armholes, you'll only have the steeks straight up the front, so that makes a very easy design to knit. And it's also got pockets. And what I thought with this pattern is, if you're a more advanced knitter, you could use the pattern as a template and put in your own colourway and your own ferrule design. And I've had her book, 150 Scandinavian Knitting Designs, sitting on my shelf for quite a while, because I wanted to design Andrew and myself matching vests for our You and Me car. Mm-hmm. This is a great book, and inside it's got life-size swatches of all of these really great designs. So both animals and geometrical patterns. Here's some houses. And just traditional patterns. So that could be a lot of fun to do as well, because this is a design I think that would suit a lot of people. Just a nice long cardigan with pockets. So some other small projects that you could practice steeking on is Kate Davies' Tea Cozy Sheep Carousel. That's a really beautiful little project, very cute. So Kate uses steeks for where the handle and the spout comes out. And another one of her projects that you could use is the dog coat, a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think we've got to do this for Jack.
A Jackie boy.
Yeah.
A project for Jackie.
Yeah, I think it's a project for you to knit for
me.
Jack.
Blimey. Steeking the dog.
Yeah. So Kate's blanket, Rams and Yowls, is also a good project. It's knitted in the round in a tube, and it's just got one steek. Now that's a really big project, but I reckon that you could actually include that in our Carl, because it's a big project and it's a beautiful one. And then Tin Can Knits have also got simple designs using steeking, and for example the Clayoquot cardigan. So you could knit a little version for a baby or a child, because their sizing goes right down to 6 months, and then you could knit one for yourself or a larger one. So there's some ideas for you just to get you going. And the other thing I wanted to say is I don't normally encourage people to go out and buy more yarn, but if you're a newbie steeker, I do encourage you to start with absolutely the perfect yarn, because then your experience is going to be so hassle-free and so easy. There's a lot of drama around steeking, but if you use the right wool, it couldn't be easier. I've only ever, or until now, I've only used Alice Starmore's yarn to steek, and with her yarn you can cut it. You don't even have to reinforce it before you cut it, and you could even not even sew it back and it wouldn't run. I have sewn it back. If I show you on the armholes here, so I steeked both the body and the armholes, that's it there, and I've just sewn back both of them, but you can cut it and leave it. It's so good. So Jamieson and Smith I've never used, but Hazel Tyndall uses it all the time, and I've heard that's just the same. You could cut it and leave it. If you want to use Jamieson and Smith and you're living in the States, the Woolly Thistle stocks all of their yarn. And really, it's so inexpensive, particularly if you're used to buying hand-dyed or hand-painted yarn. In comparison, it's a lot cheaper, and I really recommend just going out of your way to try to find a Shetland woolen spun yarn. The thing is, Shetland fibres are shorter, and if you woolen spin it, it makes it really fluffy and it sticks, and that's perfect. The yarn that I'm using on Sissel's, it looks worsted spun. I might be completely wrong, but it looks like that. It's not a smooth, silky yarn. You don't want smooth, silky yarns. You want to stay away from them if you're a newbie steeker. So it looks, it's a bit rougher, but I think I'm going to have to reinforce the steeks before I cut them with this yarn. So if you can, go ahead and buy the right yarn and you're going to have a really great, happy experience. If you can't find that yarn, then still steek. But don't judge steeking based on your experience of using the wrong yarns. It'll be a lot more work, but if you love a pattern and you've got the wool that you want to make with it, then go ahead and make it and enjoy it. But don't think that that's how hard steeking is. Yeah, that's my advice. We really want to thank all of our valued patrons for your financial support. We are independent and we don't receive finances from sponsorship or advertising. And because it really is a full-time job for me, we can only continue with the financial support of our patrons. So if you do value our show and you enjoy watching it, we do ask you to become a patron. You can do so for a small amount every month, but that small amount means that we can continue doing it. So thank you.
Yep, thanks very much. It's now time for our interview with Elizabeth Johnston. As Andrea mentioned earlier, you are going to see some absolutely amazing spinning and knitting and other interesting things. So enjoy this interview. We'll see you in the next episode in 2 weeks' time. And thank you very much for spending your time with us today.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. I'm in Shetland now and I'm sitting with Elizabeth Johnston. I'm very, very happy to be here and excited to meet her and see everything that she's got to show us and to talk about. Elizabeth is a true fibre artist. She's got highly developed skills in spinning, in dyeing, in knitting and weaving, and she's also done extensive research into the history of these crafts. So I thought we'd start with just a little bit of background information on your fibre journey and how you acquired all of these skills.
Okay, it's a long apprenticeship to do this. We start here when we're very young, and by the age of 8 I would be selling small pieces of knitwear, fair pieces, which was really good pocket money.
Yeah.
Really good pocket money. And go on from small mittens to different garments. I ended up in teenagers selling knitting yokes. But by the time I'm mid-20s, I figured I don't need to do this knitting for an income. So I would have a hobby. And the hobby was going to be spinning. I'd always wanted to spin. But it didn't take long before I was spinning more yarn than I could use. So I started selling. And that started a whole other journey through spinning yarn to sell, teaching, making patterns, travelling, just a whole different lifestyle.
And weaving, how did that develop, or what stage did
the weaving? Well, it's another part of the textile journey, and I had looked at it, but I took a job at an archaeological dig at Old Scotland on the south part of the island, and that was as living history. So you're dressed in period costume, and it was Iron Age period we were doing. So you're spending your daily work life living that as you would in that era, and I did textiles in it. So that led for more research.
Okay.
And once you start, it just
accumulated.
It just
yeah.
snowballs, and it's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
You're going back nearly 3,000 years.
3,000 years, yeah, and uninterrupted.
Uninterrupted, right up till now it's not interrupted.
Well, before we get on to spinning, let's talk about lace, because you're very well known as an expert lace knitter. So maybe talk about, because lace is quite strong in a few different cultures.
Yeah.
So tell us what defines Shetland lace knitting, and maybe talk about the constructions and where the motifs are placed, and what kinds of yarns that you use.
The yarns for lace is what we call lace weight, and then fine lace. This one is done not in lace weight, but in no, this is done in lace weight. It's lace weight, but it's a double piece.
Okay.
So it's a thicker garment. So it's
Okay.
folded. It's a square and folded over.
Yes.
And this is our common hap. That's what we call a hap. Hap means to wrap up, warm. So this garment was an outside garment. It was a jacket. It's not a garment you wore inside, really. It was your outer one.
So it's like a coat.
It's like a coat.
Yeah.
So you start on the outside edge, and we always do a lace. Some other cultures don't do a lace edge or attach it last. We typically start with a lace edge. So that is knitted in that direction,
Okay, so you're knitting it straight up like this, yeah?
and then you pick up stitches along that edge and knit the borders, or quarters we call them, because there's 4 of them, in this direction. So your cast on is there.
Okay, so your cast on is here. You knit right around the whole square,
Yes.
and it ends up being in a circle.
Yes. And then
Okay.
you graft that.
So you graft that together, and then you're knitting up like on a big circular, huge
you
circle.
knit
Yeah, all the
one
way
or
up.
2.
Yeah.
We don't do circular on this.
Okay. Yes. No. You don't do circular knitting. It's a Shetland knitting belt, but it is in a circle.
It's in a
joined
circle. We do 2 borders at a time typically, and then another 2. If you do this in a circle, circular on circular needles, you have to knit 1 row and purl the next one.
Ah. Okay.
We don't do that.
Okay.
Knit stitches are much easier to do.
So
For
you
most
keep
people.
it open in a way.
We keep it open. We keep it open on that's knitted through, and that's sewn.
Okay. And that's just grafted at the end,
That's
is
a
it?
herringbone stitch.
Ah. Okay. It is. Yes.
So it mimics that stitch.
Okay. Yeah.
It's similar.
Yeah.
For the centre, you extend 1/4, you knit your square for the centre, and then you graft around 3 sides. That's the big graft.
Beautiful. And these are all natural sheep
These
shades,
are natural
aren't they?
colours, yeah.
Even the black.
Yes.
And so even though it's an outdoor garment and it looks very fine and delicate, it's pretty hard wearing.
It's hard wearing and it's warm. You've got holes and with something over the top, so with the holes underneath here, that's insulation. It's the air trap that gives you insulation. In garter stitch, you've got air trapped in that garter. That gives you insulation.
Okay.
With wool, if you don't touch it, rain doesn't get through. It sits on the outside.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's
waterproof too.
It's warm. It's almost waterproof.
Yeah.
It does the job. This is another shawl, a smaller size, and this is size for a baby. This was knitted for one of my grandsons, and this is in my handspun yarn and dyed in indigo.
Okay.
So dyed on different colours of greys to get the different colours of blue.
Okay, so you've got different shades of natural grey fleece, and putting the indigo dye over it gives you these different shades, lovely
Yes.
tones.
But you can knit lace in any yarn. Wool is easiest, and wool wool moves, as we say. So it's very kind. This is in, and it looks the wrong way out. You've always got a 50-50. That looks a little bit better. It's only the decreases that give you the different sides. But this is alpaca and silk and cashmere mix.
Feels beautiful.
And not my preparation, but my spinning. and different colours in it. So you almost lose some of that pattern design in there because of the different colours. But it still works in different yarns.
Yeah.
And thicker yarns, it doesn't all have to be fine yarns.
Okay.
Your needle size has to be a lot bigger for a thicker yarn,
Yeah.
but it still works. You can see the pattern much easier there, where there's less busy colour.
Yeah. Lovely.
And that's a half.
That's a half
triangle.
Okay, so that would be, can I put it on?
Yeah.
That would just be worn typically around like this. Is that right?
Any way
you want.
Any way you
Yeah.
want. I like it. But see, that's really nice and warm.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. On a day in Shetland when the sun's shining. You don't need it.
It's very hot today. So what have we got here?
Then we have, this one has a little stain on it and a couple of holes in it, I know, but this is one that I keep for, just to show the variety of stitches you could put in.
Yes.
This is in Jamieson and Smith's Cobweb,
Okay.
and pattern all over. Most of it is pattern, is holes every row.
Yes.
And these are for use on Christmas, weddings, birthdays, holidays, high days.
So this isn't quite a wedding ring shawl, is it?
This isn't quite.
Yeah.
This isn't quite. I mean, it scrunches down, and that's across the full width of it. But you want a handspun, really, a handspun yarn before you get a real wedding ring shawl, and then it slips really easily through.
It's so delicate, isn't it? If you do put it around you, may I?
Yeah.
I mean, just all bunched up like this.
Yeah.
It's so cloud-like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just beautiful.
But you've still got all that warmth in there because of all those holes.
So you can put a little bit over your shoulders and a little bit.
You can use it anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's lovely. And is it strong or is it quite fragile?
No, well, the cobweb, the one ply, is a little more fragile. But if you do this thickness of yarn in a 2 ply, that ply gives it strength.
Okay.
This piece is one that I did a few years ago, but I've actually written the pattern for it now. It was knitted as a short jacket, and then I added these layers on. But these are all hand-spun yarns from the murret and the grey murret. That fleece was a real mix of colour, and I kept that going up. This is wool and silk.
Okay.
The tussa silk, which works well. But the patterns, I mean, this piece is a little impressive.
Yeah.
But the patterns that are in here are quite simple. I mean, as in the big shawl, it's pattern all over, but the pattern all over comes out of small motifs.
Yeah.
So this is the new shell, and that waves, so that gives a waterfall to the bottom. And then this pattern here is the frost flowers. A lot of people know this pattern, it's been published quite a few times. But it dissects, and almost all our patterns do dissect into smaller sections. So this section here is 4 stitches repeated, and it's the same each row, so it's done 12 times. So it's 4 stitches.
Okay, yeah.
And that forms that piece. This piece here mirrors, and each part of it is a hole, 4 holes going in that direction. And then that's repeated 3 times.
Okay.
So the pattern boils down to a small section there and 4 stitches for this one.
Yeah. So although it looks complicated, you can see that you're just working with tiny repeats.
Yes.
And it's not as difficult as what it looks. Yeah. And this is all different fleeces of murret, which is the brown.
The brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, our browns are murrets.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
For the more patterned shawls, where this whole thing looks complicated,
Yes.
it does the same thing. It boils down to small patterns. So here, this is the feather, a big pattern here. But it is rows of holes, which we call waves. So that's just a row of holes that angles off to the
Yeah.
side. In between this is the same, a small wave of a pattern which has, this one has 4 holes in it. It's called the piri
The piri
flea, which is a small fly.
Okay, small
Those
fly.
annoying little things.
Yes.
And that's put together into what we call a fishy net or a fancy net
Okay.
when it gets to be an all over pattern. But it is still 4 holes. And that goes together in a wave. So that's in between each one. So although that is a big pattern, it has small elements that build up to a big element.
Okay.
So you know all those small elements.
yeah.
It's easy to make that big one.
Yeah.
Then in between we have different smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the same again, if you know your small motifs, you're just placing a pattern that you know.
So the piri flea, is that very common?
It's a really nice one, easy one,
Yeah.
effective one to use, the piri flea. That's the piri flea in the middle, that 4 holes, if
yeah.
you can
Yes, I can.
see it. Inside a diamond.
So it looks a little bit like an eye. It's not called an
Yeah.
eye.
No. An eye is, the eyelid is a circle with 1 hole in the middle.
Okay.
That's the eyelet. In Fair Isle you have bands of pattern,
Yeah.
and the problem is the colour that goes
Yes.
into that. In this we don't have bands of pattern, or we don't want to see bands of pattern. So you can place them where you want. So you're placing for here, that's the start of that diamond, and then the fern on top. When that's finished, the next one starts here.
Okay. Yes.
So instead of having a band of this and then a band,
Yes.
although we do, if it's offset, it looks like,
a wave. Yes, I see that. And are there any other little tips that you can give lace knitters?
See it as something more simple, because it isn't really too complicated. If something is too complicated and you don't see it, go find something else. Sometimes I've been doing a lace class this week, and everybody sees a pattern in a different way. And someone can look at a pattern and say that's very straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
And the next person looks at it and think, that doesn't make sense, can't see it.
Yeah.
So go find something you can see.
Yeah.
And
then get the rhythm.
And get the rhythm. It should be enjoyable.
So as well as being an expert lace knitter, Elizabeth is also very well known and very well respected as a spinner. And we've got some Shetland fleeces here. So I thought you could talk to us a bit about the special qualities of Shetland fleece. Maybe tell us how you prepare the fleece for spinning, and also the different ways of spinning and plying to get different yarns for different purposes.
Mm-hmm. This is really my first love is spinning, and I've brought different qualities. So this is a long fibred but rough fleece. I mean, you can see that, and this is all the vegetation and dirt that we get in.
Mm-hmm.
These are all unwashed. This is straight as it comes off the animal.
Okay. Yeah.
So not dirty. So that's a long fibred fleece, but it's a heavy fleece. So that's going to do something that will give you thick socks, hiking socks, an outdoor jacket.
Okay.
It's good for a blanket. This one it's a shorter fleece. It's a fluffier fleece. It doesn't have this has a slight hair feel to it.
Very slight.
But the hair is still soft.
Yeah.
So this one is much softer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's spongier.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to give you a nice fluffy yarn. This is for a nice warm jumper.
Okay.
Bite socks. And
And
then
this is the morat, isn't it?
This is a light morat. Yeah,
Mhm.
all our browns we call murats. There are different names for them, but they're all murats.
Yeah.
So that's a light murat. Murat means moor red. That's a white one. That piece has been washed.
Yeah.
It's still a long fibred
It
fleece,
is.
but you've got the crimp in there
Yeah.
that isn't in this one. This one has a wave to it.
Yes.
This one is getting a crimp, so this one is a finer fleece.
Put that in.
So your preparations for fleece, you have to have decided what you're going to do. and choose the fleece that will work for you. The Shetland breed's a primitive fleece, so it shades its fleece. Most breeds don't shade now and have to be clipped. The Shetland will shade itself much of the time, but farmers don't want that. You want it to be clipped so you can sell the fleece. So on that underneath edge, there's a little bit of next year's fleece, and that's short fibres.
Okay.
Combing will take off most of it, but I can break off the rest. I know where that break is. So you can comb the rest of this out and spin straight from combed. So that's a preparation that changes something that would be slightly difficult to spin to something that's open and aligned. So that can be spun as worsted, which is spinning and the fibres line in that direction and you spin in that direction. Or you can do woolen, where the fibres lie in that direction and you spin in that direction.
Okay.
It gives you your light fluffy yarn.
Yeah.
So this one, just with your fingers, there's no air trapped in this. And ply it over on itself, gives you an intact. And this one, if I fudge this, because it should be rolled and then spun, you should be able to see immediately that's a fluffier yarn.
Okay. I see what you're doing. Okay, so this is the worsted and this is going to be the woolen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Two different yarns.
Yeah.
For the fine lace, for the cobweb. So removing that little bit of next year's fleece on the inside. And then, and then combing that through. And they typically use a piece of leather. So you set the comb in and you pull back. And as that opens up, you can then turn to the finer side. But that opens up and opens up quite, it's bulky. So you split and comb again. And this one I need to put on the spinner where you can't get enough twist in this by hand. That opens up further.
That's
and
beautiful.
You can split that again and comb it again, because that's the amount of wool that you're going to use at a time for the fine lace.
Okay.
So you end up with something like that. And spin from there. I spin a little bit of this. See what happens. So it's a short draw, and this I'll get finer and finer until I'm down to a few fibres.
Wow.
And when you almost can't see it, you've got it. Squeak. There's joint.
That is really cobweb, isn't it? Wow. Do you think there's about 5 or 6 hairs there?
That's what you want, down to about 5 hairs.
Look at that. You've shown us all of these different quality fleeces here. Can you find all of this on one sheet? That's what I've heard.
Yes, you will. Yeah. You'll find this, that rough one, at the back end,
Okay.
down the back legs. This is further up over the animal,
So on the back
on
or the flanks?
on the flanks,
Okay.
mostly on the flanks. A little bit further up, you'll find that quality, which is getting fine.
Okay.
Is
that on the neck?
Shoulder,
Shoulder.
below the shoulder,
Yeah.
a little bit, and then this and finer up the neck and down to the shoulder.
Okay.
That's the theory.
Right.
Just sometimes you'll find one spot somewhere on a fleece. That's a really good piece, a really fine piece.
So we're going to finish off the interview. Just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
First of all, you co-authored a book called the Warp Weighted Loom.
Yes.
So just tell us briefly, what is a warp weighted loom? And in the book, it talks a bit about its prehistoric use and its modern use. So maybe just tell us something quick about that.
The warp weighted loom, three of us worked on that book for 5 years about. It started off in a museum in Norway, Osterøy Museum, at a class for weaving on the loom. The warp weighted loom is an ancient loom. It goes back here to about nearly 3,000 years ago.
Okay.
It's an upright loom, so it stands against the wall. The warp is strung from the top of the loom. It's weighted with stones at the bottom. So we don't have the loom here. We've got archaeological evidence of the loom going back to Bronze Age and coming right through. But what we have in recent times is its name. We call it the Steiny loom. Stein is our word for a stone. So opposed to the flat loom, this is the one that uses stones. So it's a modern name for it. So that name was still known in the 50s. We have the oldest piece, the newest piece of cloth that we have, that we know is woven on that loom, dates to the mid-1700s.
Okay.
It's a tattered rug, it's in the museum, and you can tell that it's woven.
Yeah.
I've woven one piece on the loom that I have here. So it's not a loom that's a loom that can weave anything, any thickness, any quality. That is hand-spun singles.
Mm-hmm.
And then woven on and woven with, if anybody's familiar with tablet band on the top and the bottom. So finished off edges. The really good thing about this loom is that everything is a selvage.
Okay.
So with each piece that you make clothes from, we're having a selvage. There's less chance of damage. There's less chance of that wearing out. It makes a much sturdier cloth.
And so tell us a little bit about the two other co-authors that you worked with.
So we were on a class with Marta Klofjord. She's Norwegian, she's a professional weaver. And the three of us sort of had a little discussion at the class saying, we could write an instruction manual about this. And the instruction manual turned out to be this big book. But as we went through, the instruction is in there, but as we went through the process, all the history started coming up. The connections in that North Atlantic circle between Norway, Faroe would have been in there as well, Iceland, Shetland, Orkney, north of Scotland. But the loom, what was woven on that loom made all the clothes for the family, for the house, for workshops, for workspaces, anything that you needed. It also made cloth to pay rents, taxes, and you made to sell. And the joy of it all is that's all women who did all that work. So women provided all those textiles, paid the taxes, paid the rent, made cloth for sale at the same time as they cooked dinner and looked after the children.
So they were self-sufficient, really.
Absolutely.
They just sent the men off to sea.
which is the more dangerous job, we must admit.
That's amazing. That's very fascinating. Great. So we're going to finish off very shortly, but one last question, and that is you've just recently done a download or DVD together with Hazel Tyndall called 50 Knitting Tips. So just tell us what are you aiming to demonstrate or teach in this DVD?
It's the knitting tips, so it's absolutely nothing about making a garment. It's all those extra little things that you need to know to make a garment well, to make a garment easily and quickly. So that then it's like that good practice thing that they talked about in the book. If you're doing things, constructing things easily, streamlining it, you make things faster. It's more enjoyable. You don't have to struggle with all that little bits that keep going wrong.
Yeah, that's so true. It's all about learning the right technique, isn't it? If you've got a good, efficient technique, then the experience is much better, the quality is much better, everything flows a lot more, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And
So those are all professional hand knitting techniques. But as hobbyists, we can all learn them, which makes our hobby so much more enjoyable.
that's very well said. That's true. I'm an absolute believer. Okay, well, it's been so lovely to meet you in person, to spend an afternoon here with you talking about your extreme range of knowledge. We've got some of
these yarns.
different quality yarns and natural dyes here that Elizabeth has done. It's been a real pleasure and privilege.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us on the Fruity Knitting Podcast. So we'll say goodbye to the audience. Bye.
Bye.
Nothing. I'm smiling at the camera.
You took a breath like you're about to take off. Okay.
Come on.
Blimey done. Nancy Marchand, not Nancy.
Brioche purl, brioche knit, double knitting.
Yep. This is the start of Paris's Scarf by Nancy Brioche.
Oh, come on.
Okay. Ready, set. This is the start of Paris's Scarf by Nancy Marchand. It's...
Tell me, Mom, when I go home, the boys will leave the girls alone. The boat might hang and the snow might come, but that's alright till I go home. She is handsome, she is pretty, she's well of capacity. She is counting 1, 2, 3. Please won't you tell me who is she? Now the moon is fancy lights are all the boys are fighting for. When they knock at the door and they ring out the bell saying, oh,